Ken King. And we're going to try this again. I hope that we get a bunch of you guys back on. Once you guys hop on here, if you don't mind just popping in the chat, letting me know that it's actually working this time. Ken can hear me. We can see him. He's not frozen, and there's not a black screen in the middle of us. It's good. Oh man, gosh, I love all this technology stuff. So anyways, today we're talking about whether or not, about competitive drive and competitiveness, and whether or not it's something that you can instill and teach and stuff in kids, because that's our primary market right now, and people that we work with. And so let's first, before we do that, if you missed the first part of our video, let's hear about who Ken is. So I've had the pleasure of working with Ken for quite a number of years at our gym, and he comes to us with a lot of knowledge outside of our industry, also, which is also super cool to have somebody that's not familiar and outside of the industry but has done some work in it. So Ken, give us a little bit of background. Can you hear me still? Not me. Oh my gosh. Did you lose me again?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. Because when we were going, could you not hear me?
You just disappeared for a second, but I'm fine.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about who you are, Ken.
So I started as a university and college basketball coach back in Ontario, probably about 12 coach men and women through that. I've taught in kinesiology now for about 7 years. Lots of different classes, coaching, sports psych, a bunch of anatomy, physiology, exercise physiology, and training-based courses. And then when I left I guess it's considered public education sector, and went into consulting. For a brief amount of time, I was in an adapted and inclusive accessibility-based consulting company, and then went out on my own. And had Premier Academy as one of my early clients, and still one of my longest serving clients to this day, and started to really look at culture and measuring culture and performance in a way that was less ambiguous and a little bit more objective, that could be applied, because you can't manage anything and you can't grow anything if you're not measuring anything. Yeah. And it's the same thing for competitive drive. It's the same thing for any aspect of actual physical training. If you're not measuring it with some ideally objective measure, you can't actually improve it, because you don't know if you have or not. So we started to really work in that way. Riana, experienced some of the early kind of versions of our algorithms and our testing, where I would essentially take in a bunch of things that I noticed and behaviors and code them, and then try and make recommendations off them. And we've developed and continue to develop that kind of stuff. And now it's becoming a technology. So the Boost Institute continues doing one-on-one athlete and professional mentorship. We're just diving in because it's become something that has a massive need, into people who are seeking work and helping them find jobs and sell themselves. And then Boost Tech is digitizing our methodology. So really trying to take the algorithms and the data collection methods that we've created and digitize them into apps and software. The Flow project and Flow app, or FLW, are for sport, and the Grow project and Grow app, or GRW, are for business. So lots going on, and at the root of it all is really individual performance and how it affects group performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the $1 million question then, what's your opinion? Can you teach competitive drive or instill it in athletes?
Yeah, so the answer I'm inclined to say yes, absolutely, but I think that competitive drive is the cherry on top of a complex, I don't know, I'm sure you did, but I don't know how many of the people who watched this watched Friends. But if you remember when Rachel made um, the thing that had like half a shepherd's pie and half a trifle in it,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that, where there's a lot of stuff in there. Some of it people aren't really aware of, and it seems unrelated, but it's definitely an important piece to it. And a lot of people, when they try to do it, they end up just combining things together that don't work. And kind of like Rachel did with the trifle shepherd's pie thing, where it might look good on the surface, but as you dig into it, things aren't as ideal. Really what I'm getting at is that when we talk competitive drive, we're talking about emotional fitness, and the way that we build emotional fitness is different than emotional intelligence, though important. And emotional intelligence is something that we hear a lot about currently. But emotional fitness is really that emotional readiness, the same as physical fitness, where if you're physically fit and I told you to go right now and run 400 meters, you can do so, even if you weren't planning on it. If you're emotionally fit and something kind of comes at you throughout your day, your week, your month, or even your year, I don't know why I'm referencing Friends so much, but you're ready for it, and you're able to respond to it in a way that leads to success personally, professionally, as a group, that kind of thing. So if we build emotional fitness as a solid foundation with people, then they can start to actualize and achieve higher levels, like competitive drive, or what we would perceive as competitive drive. But if that person's emotional fitness is lacking, then that ability to push truly and authentically, and with a high level of vulnerability, and the ability to trust others, is just not going to be there. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but an answer of yes, you can teach competitive drive, but I would recommend teaching the emotional aspects and developing the emotional aspects of the individual first,
Right.
in order to get there.
And so what components come into play when you're talking about emotional fitness?
So the simplest way I think that I can probably describe that is, and I've got, it's funny that I moved out to my living room where I now have like perfect lighting coming from the sun, but when I was in the office, I have a fake light that lights me up. So I never need to buy the light, but because of that, you might see me look at my notes here. So when we talk about building emotional fitness, it really is that we control what we do by what we feel. That's kind of our overarching concept. So our feelings will dictate our actions. But if we want to change those feelings and change our overall results and change our actions, then we have to change our emotional patterns and our habits that happen all the time. So the ways that we respond to different things. And then if we want to truly change our emotional patterns and our day-to-day habits, then we really do have to literally change what we do inside our mind and with our body. And I'm a big believer in all the work we do is we try to be really holistic. So we're always we even like right now, you and I are talking about competitive drive and emotional fitness. But if we go deeper, I'd be talking to a lot of athletes way before that about sleeping, eating, and drinking enough water. Because those kind of things are major undercutters to a lot of the work that we do in the mind, is the things that we do with our body. And then the next kind of two key layers to that, after we talk about taking care of some basic needs like food, water, and sleep, is our capacity to go outside and experience the outdoors, and then our capacity to move or be or build our physical body. Once we do that, now we can actually work on our mind, and now we can start to develop the aspects of our internal thoughts. And there's a couple key exercises that I really like, that I think are really easy to implement. I actually just talked about them yesterday in a blog post, so they're right at the top of my mind. And I think I kind of knew that we would be talking about them today, and that was why I thought of them. The first is just really starting to address and be aware of how we think of ourselves and how we speak to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that this, especially from experience working with your athletes and your coaches, it's not a cheer cheer problem by any means. It's a sport problem, but because I've experienced it with basketball players and volleyball players, but what they're thinking to themselves and saying to themselves is just so toxic.
Yeah.
And those internal mind patterns, those internal emotional patterns that are created from that are so challenging. And like you guys do at Premier, we focus a lot on them being negative towards themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and how they frame themselves when they're speaking and thinking. But one of the things that many people miss is how they're thinking about what others say and do, and how they're framing it in their own mind. So,
Right.
and coaches who are listening or watching, well, this will resonate a bit with them, because it's that like, oh, well, he or she just never liked me.
Yeah.
Like those kind of thoughts, or his or her recommendations are just ridiculous, or
Yeah.
or expectations are just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And those kind of internal thoughts they have to be aware of too, because they're just unproductive. So journaling is a great way to do that, but even just getting them to be really aware of their thoughts. The second thing that I love, and I do this every day, is I took the exercise from a guy's name is Matthew Dix, and he's one of my favorite authors, and now a friend of mine out of Connecticut. He's got some really good books that I would recommend to any leaders. But he has this exercise called Homework for Life, and I like it because I'm not a big journaler. So when I'm doing things with any kind of recording my thoughts, or any kind of talking about my emotions and feelings and that kind of thing, I really need it to be short and quick. So I have an Excel spreadsheet, and in that Excel spreadsheet, I just have a column that is the date, and then I put notable moments from my day in the next column. So just things I never want to forget, because one of my biggest fears is Alzheimer's, dementia, forgetting things in my life.
Yeah.
I truly am less afraid of death than that. So for real, like I want to remember stuff, especially the little things that many people forget. So I put in every day a bunch of different things that are notable from my day, and they might not be notable to anybody else, but they're notable to me.
Yeah.
And what I've done for a lot of the people we mentor and work with that I think is really valuable is adding another column after that, where they just put either a C or a U. A C if it's something that was in their control, or a U if it's something that was out of their control at the time that occurred. And what I've noticed is, especially with young athletes, young coaches, and actually I shouldn't even create demographics. What I've noticed with everybody, including myself, is when I go through that, I'm calling a lot of things uncontrollable in hindsight, that in the moment I really was spending a lot of energy on, wasting a lot of energy on, because I thought in the moment they were within my control.
Right.
And then the moments that I'm identifying with hindsight that are controllable, and when I look at them and I'm thinking, like, did I max out my energy on those moments? A lot of times I'm saying no, and it's because I was wasting money or wasting energy on the moments that were actually out of my control. And starting to build that's an exercise that you can do for 1 or 2 days, and it has impact on your mindset. And I think that that's really the beginning of that emotional fitness. What am I thinking and saying to myself about myself and others? And what am I doing and putting energy into during the day that's within and outside my control?
Yeah, that's really great. Well, and I think there's so much right now, unfortunately, that is out of all of our control, and that is playing a part in it. I know that there's been comments too within some groups in between coaches on, feeling like kids just don't care these days, or they're not putting as much effort into things these days, and it's a challenge for all of us. And I think understanding that there's so much out of their control. So how can we best support those kids outside? So basically action items from that, if we can start having those conversations with them about making sure that they're basically they're taking care of themselves, right? And then also implementing some journaling. Any other ideas that you might have for that?
I think that there's an important culture piece, and you and I have talked about culture a lot over the years now.
Mm-hmm.
And the important culture piece is that we are seeing. So a couple months ago, I guess, we went down to Miami as a company, and we did some data collection with Hyatt Hotels, and in helping them build their culture back. I hate to steal the slogan from a recent president, but build their culture back better than it was even before the pandemic. Not just get back to the same, but come back better. And there was a super common theme through all the data trends of grief. The same kind of grief that people are experiencing when someone is ill or passes away, or you lose a job or a relationship ends or anything like that. And grief is super complex and multidimensional, and nobody who isn't a professional in those areas should really try to address it as a professional. However, the aspects of grief, the stages of grief that many people are familiar with, the anger, the sadness or depression, the denial, all those aspects, when we hit that sadness stage in the stages of grief, it's really like the big dip. And that's, I think, what we're seeing a lot of in our athletes, especially our youth athletes, is they don't necessarily know how to put it to words. They don't necessarily know how to verbalize it or act appropriately, but they're in that low point of grief, that big dip, the sad, potentially kind of a bit of not necessarily a clinical depression, but like a depressive kind of moment. And they don't know it, or they're not aware enough yet to, or they can't communicate it. Now, the important thing about grief is that, and Tony Robbins says this quite a bit, is that when it's just like seasons, it's just like the year. Grief is like the winter. The spring is coming, and nothing's ever bad forever. And if you think it's going to be bad forever, you're wrong. At the same time, when we talk about things like emotional fitness, nothing's ever good forever either. There's and good and bad are a little bit. There's a bit of a black and whiteness to that I don't love, but there's constant shift and change there, and there's always that next turn. So we need to be emotionally fit for the moments that we know there's probably going to be a challenge coming. But we also, in these dips or in these challenging times, need to make sure we're reminding ourselves and each other and building into our culture that idea of coming back stronger is not only possible, but statistically and literally super likely, in the same way that if winter really sucks, and we're in Canada, even though this one's actually been decent, if winter really sucks, we know spring is coming. And we're good with that. So we never get too down about winter. And so as our kids are really exhibiting these traits that might seem like lack of investment, lack of caring, lack of energy, that kind of thing, we just need to be aware that those are probably just a really deep kind of low point stage of grief from all the challenges and all the things that they're taking on, stressors from school changes, sport changes, seeing parents and loved ones around them super stressed out about things like money and that kind of thing. It's showing as one feeling, but it's in all likelihood more that dip in grief, and reminding them that things are that there's an upswing coming, that though it's challenging now, just like the last thing they thought was going to be really crappy, there was a better moment after, and building that as a common mission. And the last thing I'll just say on that is when we talk about culture, language and words are really important. So killing those statements from us as coaches and leaders that are like, oh, this lockdown, this pandemic, like money, killing some of those statements as part of our day-to-day verbiage and replacing them with more statements that are oriented to the upswing and how great it's going to be and the things we're going to be able to do and how awesome we're going to be able to become at the moment when that inevitable upswing.
Right. So focusing on the future of what's to come rather than dwelling on what is our current state.
Yeah. And I think that a big piece to that too is, though we're acknowledging that future and we're preparing for that future, it's not just about like laying in bed until we're at that moment.
Yeah.
It's definitely about making my actions, my thoughts, and my words that are right now things that are going to set me up to grab that moment and seize it and excel at that time, and not things that are weighted in uncontrollable moments of the past or uncontrollable situations that like a lockdown or restrictions of that kind.
Yeah. Absolutely. Guys, I just want to, before we continue on, if you have any questions too for Ken or comments and thoughts on the topic, then make sure to post them in the comments too. There had been somebody that had just that they had, having had grandparents with Alzheimer's, they love the daily notable memories idea. So there you go. There's a takeaway from that for sure. So when you talk about that in terms of kids being at that point where we feel like they're not caring and not putting in the effort and stuff like that, should we be holding them, and knowing what our current situation is, should we be holding them to the same standard and expectations in the same way, or should we be changing how we're handling the situation?
Again, I think the answer is twofold. So first of all, if your standards were oriented to outcomes and not processes, then you're going to have to change your standards and hold them to the new ones.
Yeah.
Because poor standards are hard to adhere to when times are good.
Yeah.
Poor standards are impossible to adhere to when times are extremely challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the standards were something that's always based on perfection or an outcome-based goal or anything like that, and they were very, very specific to certain movements or actions or words, it's going to be really challenging. Whereas if the standards are something that is actionable and in our control based on our effort, our attitude, and our energy, things that are in our control regardless of all those other uncontrollables that are occurring, then yes, hold everybody to those standards and make sure that those standards are something that you're aligned with every day, because their values and standards are nothing without aligning them throughout your organization. But paying attention and using this time as an opportunity potentially to revisit values and standards in order to make sure that they're always within the control of the people that are being held to them, and always things that they can apply in a variety of situations and are not specific just to a movement or a sport or anything like that, are extremely important. So hold them to the same standards, but only if your standards are something that they can actually control all the time. And if they're not, revisit the standards and make sure that there's something that are process-based and in control more often.
Yeah, going back to focusing more on the effort. Yeah, like you said, the effort versus always the outcome and the technique related to it. One of the things that was really cool that we had implemented at our gym with the help of Ken was effort charts as well, and that helped us have some good conversations with a lot of our athletes on some things that are definitely within their control. And I think when you look at something like stunting within our industry, where there's 4 people involved in it, they don't always have control out in the full outcome of what that stunt is going to be, but they can control their own effort in that. And we all know if they put in their full effort, then likely things are going to improve with it. So can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah. So honestly, I still to this day love those effort charts. I've implemented them in a couple other sports, and actually it's funny, I just implemented them in a local college here in Calgary for the employees of the college. And to give a little bit of a background, I guess it's really just a self-assessment combined with a outside assessment of effort. So the athlete would go over to the whiteboard and track their effort on a scale that we had created, just how they felt they did that day. And then after they left, the coach would go through and give their version of the same scale. And it's right away, it's a super challenging culture shift, because there's going to be some athletes who rank themselves, I'll just using arbitrary numbers because I don't want to give away Riana's secret sauce, but on a scale of 1 to 5, maybe they're ranking themselves as a 4, and then the coach comes in and ranks them as a 1. That's good. That hits hard, but it opens up a ton of great conversation. It makes coaching something that's really, really guided by some measurement. And as I mentioned, we can't change or grow anything that we don't measure. And it helps to bring those athletes into a high level of self-awareness that's going to benefit them way beyond just cheerleading or way beyond their sport.
Yeah.
And I do think that so many problems in coaching, and I wish I'd paid more attention to this when I was actively coaching at a high level all the time. so many problems in coaching, I think, can be solved by just implementing values that are based around solely effort and how we react to mistakes and failure. And stunting's a great example. Sorry, my dog's going to join us here. Stunting's a great example because there's so many aspects to it that I've seen that are so far out of your control in the moment. And obviously there's technique and things like that that can be improved, and zeros are good. That was something I had to learn really quick, because in my sport, if you get zero in anything, it's really, really bad. But as we're trying to achieve those impactful outcomes, the controllable for the athletes in practice, that's a great standard to hold them to, is their reaction.
Right.
So if I were to change anything about the system that we put in with your gym, Riana, it would be, we measure effort the exact same as we do, but we also implement our a bit of a scale of how did I react to situations today, especially the ones that didn't go the way I wanted them to.
Right.
Because if we're just measuring ourselves on our reactions and our effort and evaluating our athletes and having them evaluate themselves on that, I think it fixes a lot of problems in culture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. That's awesome. Okay, and guys, if there's any other questions or comments, then pop them in the chat and we will get to them. I'm just going to make sure that they're working on here as well, because I see people are watching. But if anybody has any further questions and thought, can you share with everybody how they can get in touch with you if they have questions or comments?
Yeah, we've been really aggressive lately on we got a new marketing person, and she's great, and we're everywhere now, and sometimes we're places. So like on Instagram, we're at Boost Institute, at Boost Innovation Inc., and at Ken Boost CEO. I'm on TikTok now because she wanted me to experiment with that, at Ken Boost CEO. Twitter at Ken Boost CEO, Twitter at Boost Innovation, Facebook at the Boost Institute, and LinkedIn at Boost Innovation Inc. So, and then of course our websites, boostinnovationinc.io and boostinstitute.ca are the primary places to go there. So it's hard not to find us these days.
So maybe I should also share some of those links in the comments afterwards.
That would be great, because if you want to get direct in touch with me though, Ken at boostinnovation.io is the way to do it.
Yeah, that's really great. That's awesome. Any other final thoughts from you, Ken, on our topic?
No, you know what? I think I just want to say that I'm excited to keep being around the cheerleading world. It's been unfortunate the last year, and it's kept. Well, it didn't really keep us apart. I was able to come and see you guys a little bit, but I'm happy to do this. I appreciate you bringing me on, and I'm looking forward to getting to be back in the cheer world more often, because I get a lot of funny looks when I walk into the gyms, because everybody sees me and knows immediately I don't belong. So
I know, guys, he's like a good 2 feet taller than me, probably. Not quite, but
yeah.
No, not somebody that typically walks into a gym and then in with the coaches, but we've definitely found a lot of value in what Ken has been able to bring to our gym. So yeah. All right, guys, if there's any other questions, you can post them in the comments and we'll get to them afterwards. But otherwise, we will take a moment and sign off. But if we were to answer the question that we were talking about, the topic today, yes, in a big, broad, roundabout way, yes, you can teach competitive drive, but there's a whole lot of layers, and it's not one single solution or answer to that particular question. So
yeah, absolutely.
I know. So okay, take care. Have a great day, everyone.